what I did was we recorded all of this, and the decision was made that only the music that was recorded during the time on the island could be used as the soundtrack for the film. Amazing. So the construction of it then was just sitting and working out the chronology of it, because it wasn't scripted. I basically had a vision of it, and it just evolved, this after this after this. The music was pretty much chronological to the way it was played. With us, we had a second little shoot later in the year up at Bellingen, which is a small town on the north coast of New South Wales for the local school, and that was the footage that was shot at, I think it was Scott's Head, that formed that final sequence with one piece of music that Richard recorded, which was a variant on one of the Paganini caprices that was like a bit of a madhouse thing that he'd done that was fantastic, and so we did. So I had all of that, and we built it over a period of about 4 or 5 months through, I think it was something like through July through December, actually. It was a good 6 months of editing back and forth with me doing freelance work for ad agencies, keeping money coming in, but really focused a lot on just doing the film. And I had an editor sitting next to me, Anne Carter, who was amazing. And it was through that period that I learned a lot about editing. Occasionally, most of the time it was just remembering shots from the shot list and going, actually, there's a shot here on this reel, and I'd go and we'd find it and put it in. I have a facility for remembering everything that was shot. So at the beginning of everything, I just watched it all, and I'd remember what disc it was on, and about halfway through, and it was something that I didn't know I could do, but I can. And so that's been advantageous because, obviously I did the Reef and Musica and that created, with going and seeing you guys in New York and winning, which was completely unexpected, but it was like, okay, oh God, I couldn't believe it. But I think the greatest thing about that whole trip was the friendships I made, because, I met you, I met Toddy, I met Chris Gentile at the time at the Mollusk shop across the road from the gas gasometers, whatever they're called. Those big.
Boy, that place has changed. You wouldn't believe.
It's probably gone all gentrified now.
Yep. Oh yeah.
Yeah, but it was because New York for me back then, not having gone, was this monolith of a city that I thought, and I'd probably very aware of New York in the 70s and crime and all of those things. And my brother had nearly been mugged there when he was travelling through there when he was doing something for the Australian Army. And so I had no desire. And when I went there, I went, whoa, this place is like Australia but big, like there was an Australianness about the personalities, like I really there's an openness about New Yorkers that I just loved, and Brooklyn, and the fact that there were waves so close, and I thought this is probably the most sophisticated surf town in the whole universe, but it really was a surfing town, or at least that's the way it felt. And I met cool people, Dave Dennis and his T-shirts, and it was just, I loved it. And so it's just got this.
And you got your ass handed to you in the water too one day.
Oh, of course I did.
The waves were pumping.
Yeah, it was. I couldn't believe it. I rolled up and I went, whoa, it's just like, because we've got a place near here called 13th Beach, which is, there's a place there called the Beacon, and it's like really legit big A-frames. It can be 8 foot big, like it's a really good preparative of places like Backdoor. And I looked at those big wedgy left-handers that were coming in at, I think it was Rockaway, and as it was a decent swell. And I went, whoa, okay, I didn't expect that. and I'd borrowed boards from Chris, and I'd made the mistake of choosing a very undercooked Bonza that was probably 6 inches too short and about 3 inches too narrow for me, and so, yeah, I did get a few, but I did get my ass handed to me a couple of times because trying to scratch into them. But it was fun. And I think because I always get performance anxiety when I know I'm surfing with people that I don't know, and I'm going, oh, God, here we go.
Oh, that happens to me too. All right. Not the only one.
So
I gotta say though, I mean, when you showed up in New York with that film, it was like, it did feel like you were part of the firmament a bit, because the film that you made is so experimental in its own way, and really is part of a longer kind of narrative of these kinds of kind of filmmaking that you don't see in genres. It's outside of the surf film genre. It's outside of these genres. It's an experimental process film about art, and that's very New York, frankly.
I wasn't trying to make a surf film, and neither was I trying to make one in the Reef. And probably the extension of the whole process was coming back after doing it and having a sort of about 18 months of, getting back into life, trying to sell Musica Surfica, as a doco. I think we sold it to the ABC here. And, as happens, probably had dreams of actually getting making some money out of it, but you just don't make money in documentary or anything like that. I just went, no, forget that.
And surfing either.
No. But in the end, that's not the point. You're making it to, as Toddy said, you're really trying to make a piece of art that's going to have a life. And I know that Musica now, you can still watch it because it's finless. It hasn't dated. Richard's 12 years older, and I saw him last week. We went for a surf together, but we're still, actually there's a backstory because there's going to be a little revisiting of Musica happening. So I'll fill you in on that in a sec. But it's trying to make something that's got a life and add something in the process. I think surfing films tend to, I think if you're growing up with movies, I've got a few friends and they can tell what part of their life was from the movies that have come out at the time. So they might be going, oh, I remember when I saw Pump and the first time I saw Rocky or something like that, and how good it was and how inspiring it was. And from that point of view and that whole way of learning back in those days of technically seeing an amazing surfer and going, okay, if I do my bottom turn like that and I do and you're trying to be Oki, or you go out, paddle out one day and you go, oh, that was less like Oki, but if you saw it played back, it was nothing like it at all.
It felt like it in my head.
Yeah, it felt like it in my head. But that's how we learned back then. And nowadays there's technical ways to, there's surf schools, but there's also things like Brad Gerlach's Wave Key where it's highly technical and incredibly effective, and Brad lives here in Torquay, as you probably know, and I know Brad quite well, and I've got Wave Key and I do a little bit of it. I should be doing more. I feel guilty every time
I know. Well, I keep paying every month, and I'm like, I need to get back on this.
Yeah. And but that type of thing has changed the way surfing can be learnt. And obviously, if you learned in the 70s, you taught yourself and you did watch surf movies, but you get stuck in the era that you learnt to surf. Your muscle memory is set in a certain way. And an 80s surfer, there's a fat chance they're going to be able to do an air, or a 70s one definitely, 80s maybe, 90s for sure they all can practically and onwards. But it's an interesting thing. Anyway, so back to the films. About 18 months after Musica, I was checking stuff on the internet and about what the Chamber Orchestra was doing, and randomly came across a program for the Sydney Opera House, and there was a thing called the Reef going to be on next year, the following year. And I was looking, oh, that's interesting. I wonder what that's all about. And then there's my name as the director, and I'm going, what? And Richard, what's this? And he goes, hasn't anyone told you? And I go, no. And he goes, well, we want you to direct this thing called the Reef up in Western Australia. Oh, thanks. So I had to, what are we doing? We're going up to do like we did in Musica, and going to be up at Nalu, which I was very aware of, and we're taking a bunch of surfers at Finless, and I'm going, Finless at Nalu, you serious?
So let's give our listeners who may not be familiar with Nalu what type of wave this is, because I've surfed it as well, and it is not a wave for the faint-hearted. You have a section called Tombstones, which is like a warbled up mess of like 5 lips in one wave type of thing, and lots of sharks and a creepy paddle out.
It's a wild. It's that, but you know the intent was to get Nalu big. So if you were over about 6 to 8 feet, I mean Nalu, I saw it 12 feet, and at that sort of 10, 12 feet, which is 15, 18 foot faces, at least. It's I'd call it 400 meters of pipeline with steps. It's a brutal wave. So we got there, and I had to.
And it's pretty remote too, by the way. It's super remote. It's in the middle of nowhere.
It's 2 9-hour drives north of Perth. I had how many surfers? About 25, 30 people altogether, with about 10 surfers, and the surfers included Derek and Ryan Birch, who I'd wanted to get, and Dane Beaver. It was sort of the cast of Musica Surfica, Dane Beaver, Derek, who else was there? And sorry, I'm just going a bit psycho here with who was
Don't
there.
worry.
And
That's a lot of names.
and Ryan. So, but I remembered Ryan, and I knew that he'd done some of the work on the Lordboard, the little foam Lordboard, and seen that sort of finless. And I thought, crikey, that up there might be really interesting. Mm-hmm. And I was very aware of Ryan's smarts and his youth. And his physicality is not dissimilar to Derek's, that loose, rangy type of thing. And I thought, well, and we'd had a conversation down on King Island about what happens when young people get onto this finless thing. And Ryan was like the absolute epitome of what was about to happen. And so we got Ryan up there, and they bounced off each other very well because they were so similarly intelligent, similarly au fait with board design, similarly on board with the whole idea. But Derek and I didn't see eye to eye was I really thought that Ryan should be allowed to surf with fins occasionally too. But basically he came on board and did it finless, and he did it incredibly well, to the point that he took the Lordboard out one day at 7-8 foot toomies with the double lips and all of that, and was getting pitted, like it was ridiculous. So
and this is the Lordboard for our listeners is basically just the slab of foam that Ryan maybe hammered in little dots on the bottom to give some golf ball aerodynamics, and there's really nothing other than that. It's just pretty slabby, isn't it? So he's riding a 4.5 foot slab of foam.
Yeah,
basically.
it's a rectangle. It's a rectangle with a little bit of concave shaped in the bottom, and you wouldn't call it rocker. It was flat. It had a little bit of curve shaped in the leading edge. Yeah, and he was actually, we spoke about it, and he'd move his feet around to give it a convex or concave flex. He could control the rocker, and he was able to do proper bottom turns, but then he'd swing up and spin it, but the fact that he could actually pull into a barrel and actually control in the tube and make the drops there, because if you've ridden Nalu, the drops ridiculous. And the most interesting thing I found, or the most humorous, was him paddling out, because you couldn't duck dive really. So what he'd do is, just as a wave was coming to the wall of whitewater, he'd slide off and throw it over the wave like a frisbee. And swim under the wave, and then grab it and do the same thing if he was having to. So it was not duck diving; it was frisbee throwing, and eventually broke it, but then he glued it back together and all of that. So we did that, and like I had to. And Johnny Frank was doing the shooting all the time. We had a land crew, and John would be swimming for 6 hours a day, 3 in the morning, 3 in the arvo, and as we know, an incredible water cameraman, and we'd do rushes at night and check all the footage out and do I was doing a little bit of not quite editing, but mental editing while it was happening.